Cassie and I went to the Rose Center in Morristown to observe some artwork, and the artwork that I chose for her to, I guess, rip apart or investigate further was Coming Home. The artist, her name was Betty Bullen, and the median was a limited edition of 200 prints. The reason I chose this piece was because it was just intriguing to me. The way that she captured a moment in her possibly history that meant a lot to her. She showed a lot of feeling and emotion behind the piece. So I've compiled a list of questions to ask Cassie about this specific piece, Coming Home. Cassie, what do you think the artist wanted to communicate?
I think the artist wanted to communicate a young soldier coming home after a long, horrific experience from the war.
I agree. I do think that she wanted to communicate a soldier coming home, because that was the whole center of her picture, was this soldier coming home after a long, drawn-out battle in war. I feel like she was trying to convey the message of just maybe a sense of relief on his part, because he's finally made it back home after this long, hard battle that he had endured. So what do you see in the artwork that makes you say that?
What I saw in the artwork that made me think of this was a soldier with a packed bag walking down a path toward what appeared to be his home.
I think it's very interesting that you chose to mention the duffel bag, because it's actually one of the first things that I saw when I saw the painting. And in my mind, as I was reflecting on the duffel bag, it was so full and so heavy that it appeared like he had all of his belongings that he'd ever owned in that duffel bag, and he's coming home, and it just looked so heavy, and he was relieved to be home, but then there was this long path leading up to the house, and it was almost like he was kind of exhausted, because he was just, he was excited, but then this duffel bag was here. And so yeah, I find it interesting that you mentioned the duffel bag, because I felt like it was an important part of the piece as well. What can the image tell you about the artist? In this instance, the painter. What do you think this painting is telling you about her?
The image tells that she is probably a sister or a mother to a soldier, and this art piece was like a reflection of a memory that she had had of them coming home.
Yeah, I definitely think that she's probably a sister, possibly a sister. I could see a mother too, but possibly a sister. Maybe it was a childhood memory for her of maybe her big brother that had gone off to fight the war, coming back, and they didn't realize maybe he was going to make it back, and here he was back, and maybe that was such a good memory for her. And I feel that she captured that well. Even though the painting was very simple, there was just a few elements within the painting. I feel like she made a pretty powerful statement with her piece just because of the simplicity of it. So I think there has to be some emotional connection to that, which is why I definitely agree with you that there's probably a memory that she's had at some point in her life that has compelled her to paint this piece. What do you imagine could have happened moments prior to or after the scene shown here?
In the art piece, no one was outside. So this makes me feel that this was a surprise homecoming. So I imagine that when he walks through the door, his family will be in tears of happiness because he is home safe.
I think that's actually very observant of you to catch that no one was outside. I personally didn't really catch that, but now that you mention it, yeah, no one was outside. Actually, all looks quiet. To be honest, there's no tractors. There's not like everything's kind of put away, and the image of the painting is just kind of the soldier and the path and the farmhouse. There's no other person in sight. So, yeah, that's actually pretty observant. I imagine that you're probably right. He probably, it's definitely a surprise, for sure. And so I imagine when he opened the door, his family probably was taken back. I can only imagine. Which, if what I feel is right, if maybe Miss Woolen was a sibling to that, that's probably why that memory was so impactful for her. But I kind of actually, when I was thinking about this question for myself, I was thinking about prior to, like, can you imagine getting I'm sure he possibly, because in the time frame, I'm not exactly sure what year or what era she was trying to capture, but I'm thinking like World War II, because it kind of the soldier's uniform that's I don't know why I'm leaning toward that, but I'm thinking he's had to ride a really hot bus to get to this place, and I'm sure he is exhausted, plus going back to the duffel bag being extremely heavy, and I'm certain he is probably just beside himself to be home, and then to find his home with no one on the porch waiting for him. I'm sure the anxiety inside him was building too, to just like take off running down that path. But she doesn't really show that image. She actually shows him, he looks almost like he's just calmly walking down that road toward home. So I think he's probably exhausted from what he has endured in war, plus the trip back home. So yeah, I very observant. What does this remind you of? What does this piece remind you of?
It reminds me of my papa's farm, as it is very secluded, and the long path leading up to the house is very similar to the path that leads to my papa's.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you grew up on a farm all your life, so I could totally see how that you would correlate that painting to your childhood memory. I can see that because the environment around it looks pretty similar to that. If this artwork produced sound, what would they be like? Describe them in detail and explain your thinking as to why you feel that way.
The noises that I would relate this to would be the sound of wind, whippoorwills, and farm animals rustling in the distance, whether it be the patter of horse hooves or a cow bellowing.
Yeah, I can see that. Honestly, and to go a little bit further, when I when I looked at it, I could almost hear the crunching of the rocks um, as he's walking up that path. Yeah, I could see the farm, the wind. Great analogy, Cass. Um, what feeling or mood do you get from this artwork?
The feeling that I get from this piece is warmth and happiness, as I could almost place myself in his family's footsteps as he opens the door.
Yeah, I think he is very, the piece is very inviting, very warm and inviting. What words help to describe this artwork?
It has all of the essentials of a farm, such as a farmhouse, a long path, mountains, fields, and it is very secluded.
I agree. I think the art piece kind of gives me the sense that it's like tucked away back in the mountains somewhere. The mountains of East Tennessee, being she's an East Tennessee artist, so I'm assuming she's took her environment and the elements that we have around us now and put that on paper. So I agree. I think it's definitely a farm close by. What title would you give this artwork and why?
Bullen gave this piece a very accurate title as Coming Home, because I couldn't see this piece as anything else.
Yeah, I think the title was very appropriate because basically soldier path home. Yes, absolutely, soldier coming home. If I were to like think about it and just again going back to the duffel bag, I would probably title it Exhausted Man, because I'm sure that he is overwhelmed with what he has just went through with war and then coming home to this quiet, serene place. I'm sure he's ready to relax and milk the cows. When you learned the title of the artwork, how did you associate the words with what you saw in front of you?
When I learned the title of the artwork, I thought it was perfect because it was exactly what I was seeing, which is a soldier coming home.
Yeah, I thought she captured it well. You're right. How does the placement of objects or people, shapes, that sort of thing, within the work create feelings or focus or communicate ideas?
The tree is in the center, so your eye automatically focuses on the tree. And then you see the house in the distance. And as you pan that out, you see the soldier with his packed bags, making his way to home. So it communicates a soldier and a path and a home. So it automatically communicates that it is a soldier coming home.
Yes, I think you captured that pretty well. I think it definitely communicates a soldier going home because of the elements that she put in place, which was house, road, field, trees, and soldier. So there's no other, that's representation, that he's going home. Or he's going to a place of haven, rest. Is the passage of time represented here?
No, it is not represented because time seems to have stood still for a brief moment, because I feel that the soldier is just taking it all in because he is happy to be home. And he wants to just hit the pause button and stop time.
I agree. I think he probably does want to hit the pause button because he's been through a lot. War is not pretty, it's not easy, it's hard. So I think when he stepped off that bus to come back home, he probably just wants to throw that duffel bag down and plop under that tree for a few minutes and just kind of take it all in, because the elements that he had been used to being war was chaotic, and this seems more serene and peaceful. So yeah, I imagine he probably would want to hit that pause button for a minute just to take it in.